There's an old country road near my town, a narrow, winding path that snakes through a dense forest. It's a road people avoid after dark. They call it Devil's Hollow. There's a local legend about the road, a story that has been passed down for generations. They say if you drive down Devil's Hollow at midnight, you might encounter the Midnight Rider. I never believed in ghosts or legends. They were just stories, told to scare children or entertain teenagers around a campfire. But last summer, I had an experience that changed my perspective forever. It was a hot, sticky night in July. My friends and I were at a party on the edge of town. The party was typical loud music, cheap beer, and the kind of reckless energy that comes with youth. Around midnight, the conversation turned to local legends, and inevitably, someone mentioned the Midnight Rider. "He's just a myth," I said, scoffing at the idea. "There's no such thing as ghosts." "You really think so, Jake?" one of my friends asked. He had a mischievous glint in his eye. "Why don't you prove it?" "Drive down Devil's Hollow tonight." The challenge was too tempting to resist. Fueled by a few drinks and the bravado of youth, I agreed. We piled into my car, Jake, Sarah, and Mark, and headed towards Devil's Hollow. The road was just as eerie as the stories described. Tall trees loomed on either side, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under the tires. As we drove deeper into the forest, the road seemed to narrow and twist unnaturally. An unsettling silence fell over the car. My friends, who had been laughing and joking minutes before, now sat in tense silence. "Come on, guys. It's just a road," I said, trying to break the tension. But even I could feel the oppressive weight of the place. We reached a sharp bend, and there, in the middle of the road, stood a figure. My heart skipped a beat. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt, and a black coat. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. I slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a halt just a few feet from him. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the man lifted his head. His eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to swallow the light. Who is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The man stepped towards the car, and instinctively, I locked the doors. He reached out a hand, pressing it against the windshield. His touch left a frosty mark on the glass, despite the warm night. "Drive," Mark said urgently. "Just drive." I hit the gas, swerving around the man. As we sped past, I glanced in the rearview mirror. He stood in the middle of the road, watching us. Then, impossibly, he started to follow, his movements unnaturally fast and fluid. "He's following us," Jake shouted. Panic set in. I floored the accelerator, the car roaring down the narrow road. But no matter how fast we went, the Midnight Rider kept pace, his dark figure looming in the rearview mirror. "There's no way he can keep up," I shouted, more to myself than to anyone else, but he did. Every twist and turn of the road, he followed, always just a few feet behind. His hollow eyes seemed to bore into my soul, filling me with a cold dread. "Take the next turn," Mark yelled. "Maybe we can lose him." I saw the turn ahead, a sharp right that led onto an even narrower path. Without thinking, I yanked the wheel, sending the car careening onto the new road. The tires screeched as we skidded, but the Midnight Rider stayed with us. "How is he doing that?" Sarah cried, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," I shouted back. "Just hang on." The road ahead was even more treacherous, winding and overgrown. Branches scraped against the sides of the car, and the underbrush threatened to pull us off course. But the Midnight Rider was relentless. Then, without warning, the road ended. We burst out of the forest and onto a narrow bridge that spanned a deep ravine. I had no choice but to cross. The wooden planks creaked under the weight of the car, and I could feel them shifting dangerously. "We can't stop here," Jake said, his voice tight with fear. "We have to keep going." But as we reached the middle of the bridge, the Midnight Rider appeared at the other end. He stood there, blocking our path, his hollow eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Back up," Sarah screamed. "We have to go back." I threw the car into reverse, but it was too late. The Midnight Rider raised his hand, and a gust of wind slammed into the car, sending us skidding sideways. The car teetered on the edge of the bridge, and for a moment, I thought we were going to plunge into the ravine below. But the car held, balanced precariously on the edge. The Midnight Rider approached slowly, his eyes fixed on us. I could feel his presence, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to sap the strength from my limbs. "We have to get out," Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. "We have to run." But there was nowhere to go. The bridge was narrow, and the forest on either side was impenetrable. The Midnight Rider was getting closer, his dark form looming over us. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end, but then I heard a sound, a low, rumbling growl. I opened my eyes and saw a pair of headlights approaching from the other side of the bridge. It was a truck, an old, battered pickup that looked like it had seen better days. The driver, an elderly man with a weathered face, leaned out the window. "Get in," he shouted. "Hurry." We didn't need to be told twice. We scrambled out of the car and ran towards the truck. The Midnight Rider was almost upon us, his hollow eyes burning with rage. But as we reached the truck, the old man threw something into the air, a handful of salt. The Midnight Rider recoiled, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. We dove into the truck, and the old man hit the gas, speeding away from the bridge. As we drove, the Midnight Rider's form faded into the darkness, until finally, he was gone. We sat in stunned silence, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. Who are you?" I finally asked the old man. "Name's Tom," he said, his voice gravelly. "I've been keeping an eye on that road for years. You're lucky I was out tonight. What was that thing?" Sarah asked, her voice still trembling. Tom sighed, his eyes reflecting years of hard-won knowledge. "They call him the Midnight Rider. Used to be a highwayman back in the 1800s. Robbed and killed travelers on that road. Finally got caught and hanged, but his spirit never left. Now he haunts the place, looking for souls to drag into the darkness." We drove in silence for a while, the weight of Tom's words sinking in. Eventually, he dropped us off back in town, and we thanked him profusely. But as we walked home, the experience lingered in our minds. I never drove down Devil's Hollow again. None of us did. The road still stands, a dark reminder of that night. And sometimes, late at night, I think about the Midnight Rider, and I wonder how many others have encountered his ghostly figure on that lonely stretch of road. I learned to respect the old legends after that. Some things are better left alone, hidden in the shadows where they belong. The Midnight Rider is one of those things, a specter of the past, forever haunting the present. And if you ever find yourself driving down a dark, lonely road at midnight, remember to be careful. You never know what might be waiting in the shadows, ready to follow you home.